TO plays.
Okay, so now that I'm all done rescuing Kerbals, I think it's time to get back to either putting a satellite into orbit or getting to the moon. So let's see what. Oh, okay. There's my answer. Bring a moonstone back. There's also a geosynchronous orbit of Kerbal. That's a satellite mission. So I'm going to take the moonstone mission. I got 5 active missions. Plant the flag, bring a moonstone back. Alright. Go ahead and accept these rescue missions before they disappear on me. So I'm maxed out on my contracts. I've got to finish some of these. Let's go to the moon. See if there's any other R&D that I haven't unlocked that I've got enough points for. Yeah, I've got enough for one of these. Flight control is going to be pretty helpful. I've been struggling without reaction wheels. My re-entries have been pretty ugly. I don't technically need the poodle to get to the moon, although it would have been nice. So let's go ahead and snag that since we can. We're about to get an awful lot of science at the moon, and I'll be able to unlock some of the other stuff that I've been looking forward to. So the vehicle assembly building. And let's just see how I want to do this. I think in the past, I've only gone to the moon first with 1 Gerbonaut. It's tempting to take 2. Technically, I can do 2 in the P. So, let's do 2. Scientist and a pilot. That'll be the ticket. Okay. So, let's see if I've got any small tanks. Oh, so this will be the part of the ship that comes back to Kerbal. So there's a coupling and a heat shield already on there. So let's go ahead and add a payload with a couple of parachutes. Got a snoring dog under me. I don't know if you can hear that. Could also put the parachutes up here. Yeah. Let's do that for aesthetics. Oh, there's our parachutes. And then inside of there, I'll probably only put experiment storage module, which I mentioned earlier. Well, technically, I could just put some science equipment in there. It'll come back with me. Let's just leave it like that. That's all that's coming back. Right. And then let's see what's going to get us to the moon. Tempted to do a single stage like that with once we're going to do decouplers, gives me the ability to add some exterior tanks. And these tanks might as well be the 200s. On top of those, I'm going to add my landing struts. So that gives me a nice wide profile. Makes me not as likely to tip over when I get to the moon. My door's here. I don't suppose it makes that big a difference if I straddle the door or not. I guess it would be good form. So my engine's got clearance. Doors here. I don't believe I have. No, I don't have a ladder or any structural stuff for the doors anyway, so okay. Also in my service bay, might as well add the battery. My reaction wheel, and then this should tuck there. Looks a little funky. Make that disappear. So the reaction wheel is there, you just can't see it. Alright, close that. There's my source of electricity. Put plenty of solar panels. Communication. Doesn't hurt to have several of those. Antennas. Now for our science. How do I want to do this? Balancing the weight and everything. Put the Science Junior there. All the experiments strapped to it. That'll be the last thing I ditch. Give me an opportunity to run some science if I need to on the way back. Alright, so there's my lander. That's going to the moon. 2 Kerbal, hopefully. All of that should hopefully fit inside this fairing. Oof. Almost. Okay, that's a problem. Let's see. I guess I can technically do that. That looks a little strange, but it would fit. No. I'm gonna go with another design that I've used before. If you thought that I was rehearsing these videos before I was filming them, this should be pretty good evidence that I'm winging it. Still trying to straddle that door. Make sure my struts are still going to clear the engine. Or the engine's going to cut the ground out. Alright, that's funky looking. That'll fly. Lots of delta V. Lots and lots of delta V. It's a little too top heavy. Alright, final adjustment, I promise. I lost some fuel. But It's a little bit wider of a base. Yeah, I got most of my delta V back, so that'll do. This will be the final design. All right. Yeah, plenty of room for the fairing. Now let's build the transfer stage. I'm not doing it Apollo style launch, as you can see. Try to take my lander and my return vehicle back down to the surface. All right. And now the interesting parts. So I'm going to use one core Reliant, swivel engine, and then 3 pairs of swivel boosters. And the reason I'm doing 3 pairs instead of 6 is each of the pairs will have fuel lines feeding the adjacent pair, so they will detach in pairs. That's one of the most efficient booster designs you can make. Let's see, aligning it with the wrong part. Maybe kind of lined up right there. Okay. Alright, so I'll make my first pair. Some struts down there, decoupler up there, and some wings. And that should fly. I'm going to copy that. Trying to get it pretty well aligned. And I'm going to copy it again. Not perfectly aligned, but that'll do. Okay. And then because these are recognized as separate pairs, if I grab one fuel line, it'll only affect that one pair. So those 2 tanks will attach to the adjacent tanks, and then these 2 tanks will attach to its adjacent tanks. So now this pair of boosters is feeding into this pair is feeding into this pair, and this pair is feeding into the core. It's called asparagus staging. So for this to work correctly, this pair needs to ditch first. Then this pair, and then the other pair is last. And then obviously we'll put all of our engines staging together. And you can see how the delta V builds as you lose the boosters and the weight starts to shed. So that should be plenty powerful enough to get our fancy lander to the moon and back. Really only concerned about that transfer stage and not having enough reaction wheels, but should be all right. Should have plenty of power. Should be able to transmit. Oh, ditched my communitrons earlier. Let's put a high gain antenna anyway. Let's see. All right. Put it right there. This is moon lander 1. See who the lucky Kerbonauts are going to be. Definitely going to be Jeb. Sorry, Bill. We need Bob. Jeb and Bob. Yeah, that'll do. All right.
Right, so here you'll mostly see a typical launch. My heading and orbit are going to be about the same, and the main difference is the asparagus staging that you saw me set up. So those first two boosters, they're already at half fuel. Those are going to be the ones to drop off first. And they're actually feeding all 7 engines right now, which is why they drain so quickly. The next pair is only feeding 5 engines. They're going to drain slightly slower. And then the last pair is only feeding 3 engines. And they drain again slightly slower. So the beauty with this setup is with each stage, the remaining tanks, they're full. So I managed to get to orbit without ditching even my core swivel. It's still fully fueled when I get to the upper part of the atmosphere. And there you can see I held on to a couple engines a little too long. I wasn't paying attention, forgot to stage them. But yeah, this is a really efficient setup. It just takes a little practice to set up asparagus staging. But yeah, when you don't have a whole lot of parts to work with and you're dealing with some of the more basic engines like the swivels and the Reliance and the smaller diameter engines, then asparagus staging is a great trick to use. So like I said, I'm going to get to orbit with just the bottom stages, which is great because that transfer stage, the Terrier engine, as you'll see in a second, I don't anticipate it's going to be very powerful for the amount of mass that it's got to push. So I didn't want to have to circularize my orbit with that Terrier engine, and I had a feeling I wouldn't. And I'll be able to use it to do my transfer burn, which is probably going to end up being a little longer than I would usually like. But again, I don't have a whole lot of engines to play with right now. So there you can see I'm getting up to 2,000 meters per second, trying to hold my apoapsis. I usually like to hold it below 100,000, so I'm not wasting too much fuel. 70 to 100 is the sweet spot. So I do throttle down a little as I get closer to 100,000 kilometers. So 100 kilometers, 100,000 meters. So there I'm gonna speed up time, do a little time warp to get to my apoapsis to within like 30 seconds or so of my apoapsis, and then I'm gonna finish off my circularization. Yep, I blew my fairing so that my solar panels can take in some power. And there we go, I'm circularized. Still have, 130 meters per second left in that core stage, so that's great. And there, if you caught it, you can see it better here. The Mun is pretty much on the horizon with Kerbin, which is basically where you need it to be to do a transfer burn. So I'm not actually even using a maneuver node, just based on the position of the Mun and where it needs to be in the sky. I know that if I burn prograde right here long enough, it's gonna give me a pretty decent intersect with the Mun. If you want to be really precise and use just the bare minimum fuel, you can use a maneuver node and you can move it along your orbit and pinpoint where's the best place to burn at. Technically, this is a little late. The Mun is further away from the horizon than I would like, but I got plenty of fuel in this design, so it'll be forgiving. I don't need to make a perfectly efficient burn. I just thought it was really cool that when I circularized my orbit, I was already pretty much headed facing the Mun, and the Mun was already visible at the horizon. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using that Terrier engine in my transfer stage. Like I said, it's taken a while. The game's going at double speed, but if I had to gander, that's probably a good 2 to 3 minute burn in game. So I have my tracking station upgraded. So there you see the closest approach, and there you see the Mun encounter. So I'm just dialing it into my periapsis around 30,000 meters. You don't want to approach the Mun too high because then you're wasting fuel when you get there to lower your orbit. You don't want to approach too low. Something like 10,000 would probably be way too low the Mun does have some big craters and hills and stuff. So anything higher than 10, you're probably safe. I usually go for 20 to 30. And there, Bob Kerman's getting his is earning his paycheck. The reason I brought Bob along is because I'm only using one science experiment, and Bob is a scientist. He is able to run the experiments while in EVA, collect the data, and reset the experiments. So like that materials bay and the mystery goo unit, usually you can only use it once and then it's spent. Well, Bob can he can reset it so that it can be used multiple times, and then he takes all that data and he puts it in the return module that'll actually go back to Kerbal, because I'm going to dump those experiments when we're done. So now that Bob's done some science within the sphere of influence of the Mun, we're going to get back in the pod and circularize, as you see. I don't need to have a good parking orbit, because again, this isn't an Apollo style mission. I'm not leaving the service module in orbit or anything like that, but I like to circularize because it gives me opportunities to pick a good landing zone. I can basically pick where I want to land, and then the opposite side of the moon from that position I can burn retrograde, bring my orbit down where I want it to be. It's also handy if you put yourself in a nice circular orbit. You could pause the game, you could walk away from it, you could save the game and exit, and your craft is in a nice orbit from the next time you sit down and want to get back at it. So there you see I'm slowing down so that I can begin my approach to the surface. I still got lots of fuel in that transfer stage, which is great. So I'm spending the rest of that fuel now. I'm gonna go ahead and jettison, or stage rather. And there's my lander, still fully fueled, and I'm already on a trajectory to land on the Mun. So that was a really efficient, maybe over-engineered vehicle. So I'll definitely reuse this same design, maybe with some minor tweaks, because it obviously can get the job done. So here I am on my approach. I don't like to approach the Mun with more than a few hundred meters per second as I get down to this altitude. I think around the point here where you start to see the textures on the surface, you need to be going around 100,000, give or take. Depends on the efficiency of your engine. So in this case, the Terrier is keeping up pretty well. So I can afford to be going a little fast because I know I can slow down fast enough. But if you're dealing with a more efficient, maybe a weaker engine that burns efficiently but doesn't burn with a lot of thrust, then you definitely need to slow down more aggressively or more earlier. You want to burn as late as possible so that you're not fighting the gravity of the moon. You want to slow down at the last possible second, basically. So I'm not actually doing that in this case. I'm going much slower than I need to be at this altitude. I could have waited a little later, but I didn't want to have to reshoot this video or a quick save or anything like that. I kind of wanted to nail it on my first try just to show you it can be done. So to that end, I'm just being extra careful, and I'm going to land at 2.5 meters per second, which is pretty slow. Those landing legs can probably handle 8 or 10 meters per second. So I was actually definitely feathering it in. So there's Bob again, working for his paycheck, running the science experiments, restoring the mystery goo, restoring the materials bay, running all the experiments. He's going to load them back in the return module, and I'm going to get an awful lot of science. At the beginning of the game, at the beginning of a career mode, going to the moon is like the first big injection of science points. My first career playthrough, this probably took me 4 or 5 times longer to get to this milestone, and by that point I was really, really scrounging for science points on Kerbal, building jets, driving around the surface, and getting 2 or 3 science points here or there. And in this mission I probably get more science than I've gotten up to this point in the career mode combined. So it's definitely a great milestone to hit. And there I see Jebediah is planting the flag. There's a neat mechanic in the game. So long as all the Kerbals are within a certain distance of each other, they all get credit for planting the flag. So Jeb is actually the one that did it, but Bob gets credit for it. And planting the flag is useful because it gives them experience points that allows them to level up. So you only get experience for orbiting a celestial body, planting the flag. I don't know if there's a third thing. I think it's either orbiting or planting the flag. I'm not sure if there's any other ways to gain XP. And I think Jeb and Bob are already level 1. I don't know that the moon's going to give them enough XP to get to level 2, but it'll be close. So maybe when they go to Minmus next time, they'll get that level 2. You don't get any additional experience points with a Kerbonaut by planting the flag on the same celestial body. So now that they've been to the moon, that's it. Here you see me going to the astronaut complex. I need to do, the Research and Development Center. I need to upgrade their R&D center because doing so gives my Kerbonauts the ability to collect surface samples. And if you recall, I picked up a contract to go and grab a moon rock. Well, I can't do that if Bob or Jeb can't collect a surface sample. Well, now they can, so I'm going to go ahead and use Bob's EVA pack, and he's going to go and fly off in search of a rock. The moon's pretty barren, so it's pretty easy to see. There's the only rock within so many kilometers, so go ahead and try to land next to it. And it can be a little tricky. You can't interact with it quite so easy, so there we go. Looking for, I just collected a regular surface sample, but it doesn't actually pick up the rock. So I'm trying to see where I need to position Bob. Probably need to climb on top of it, I think is what I ended up doing. Yep. And there you go. I'm collecting the moon rock. And that whole rock fits inside his pocket. And it actually makes him a little slower, and it affects his mass. But it's kind of negligible in this environment. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Bob back in the lander and go ahead and get off of this rock. Yep. I think I'm gonna do a little more science on the way out. You can run the different experiments in different biomes and different parts around the celestial body. So I think the first time I ran the experiments coming in, I was in high orbit over the moon or the Mun. Now I'm in low orbit, so I think all these experiments are gonna be rerun. And when I get back in orbit around the Mun, I'll get Bob out again. He can go and collect all the data, put it back in the return module. Because again, I'm ditching everything below that P reentry module, the circular one, and everything else is gonna burn up on reentry. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my lander back in a circular orbit and get ready for my transfer back to Kerbal. I think I might have used the antenna a couple times. Some of the experiments, you get full credit for the experiment by transferring it, but most of them you do not. So most of your experiments, it definitely benefits you to bring the data back to Kerbal. You get more science points that way. But things like crew reports, you get full credit by using the antennas and transmitting. So I think I might have done that a couple times. And now I'm just looking for my transfer window. So to get back to Kerbal from the Mun, you do a maneuver at the position where the Mun is to your left and Kerbal is to your right, where you're between the two bodies, which would be, I guess, the 6 o'clock would be. Kerman's at your 6 o'clock, I'm sorry, and the Mun's at your 9 o'clock. And in that position, you're actually burning retrograde to Kerban's orbit. So right now I'm burning prograde to my orbit around the Mun, but that happens to be retrograde to Kerban's orbit. So I'm slowing my orbit in relation to Kerbal. And there you see my periapsis for Kerbal is getting nice and low. You want to get it into the atmosphere, depending on how far you'll be traveling from and how fast you'll be going. You don't want to be too low. So a Mun approach, it's not very far away. I'm not going to be traveling more than 3,000 meters per second, give or take, and my heat shield can most definitely handle that. But I've got so much fuel left in my my remaining stage. I'm actually going to time warp until I get to about the atmosphere, and then I'm going to burn the rest of my fuel to slow down, because there's no reason to hit the atmosphere at 3,000 meters per second if I can expend 1,300 meters per second worth of fuel. So that's what I'm doing here. You don't have to do this. You can jettison that bottom stage and re-enter, and you'd probably be all right. But I've got the fuel. I thought I would show you how handy it could be. I'm lowering my speed an awful lot before I hit the thickest part of the atmosphere, so I'm definitely going to land safely without any issue. So let's see what else. Like I said, I'm going to get an awful lot of science points from this, and I'm going to complete those 2 contracts. So that's gonna be handy. I can't wait to spend those points, get some bigger and better parts. I think I'm getting towards the end of the video, so I'll give you the spoiler alert. I ended up collecting 683 science in this one mission, so that's gonna allow me to unlock an awful lot of technology. If I go back to the Mun and choose a different biome, I can redo all that science and get pretty much the same amount, get 500 to 600 science points. So I'm actually gonna probably go back and do that in my next mission. So I may end up speeding up the next video because it's basically a rinse and repeat of this mission. But when you're in career mode, you tend to do that. You tend to grind a little to get the science points that you need. So that's my first Mun mission. As always, I hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, please hit that like button, leave a comment. Appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you next time.